All right. Hey guys, Mr. Kyle, Myers Mathematics, and let's just jump right into it. I just finished doing well, this is part of a series, but I just finished doing inequalities, and now I'm kind of taking a step back, no pun intended, to equations. So, in like how you normally learn it, you normally learn equations and then inequalities, but I kind of skip to equations. So I'm going back now to equations. So if you've already been following this series, then this might be like, oh, wait, I've already done inequalities. But if you're just kind of searching around and you find this, I'm going to be explaining it as if I haven't already in this series. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's start off with a nice blue color here. So if we want to solve an equation, if you remember, there was this thing called PEMDAS, P-E-M-D-A-S. And if you're not familiar with PEMDAS, the P stands for parentheses, E for exponents, M for multiply, D for divide, A for add, and S for subtract. And if all of this sounds way too simple, then you're welcome to skip ahead a little bit and get straight to when I'm working out the problems. So go ahead and do that if you already know some of this recap here. But the opposite of PEMDAS is actually SADMEP, if you spell it backwards. I don't know if you knew that. So SADMEP, the S-A-D-M-E-P, still stand for what they stand for. S for subtract, A for add, so on and so on, but in reverse order. So PEMDAS is actually when you're simplifying. When you're simplifying, meaning you're kind of just doing one thing at a time. One thing at a time. Or in the case of an equation, if you did PEMDAS, it would be one side at a time. So one thing or side at a time. You're not affecting both sides of the equals. You're just kind of cleaning things up, so to speak. So that's simplifying. And when you solve an equation, you might have to simplify a little bit at the beginning, usually, but every now and then in the middle or so as well. Sometimes. Once you're done simplifying, you want to solve. So for solving, right, we want to solve each equation. Then we do two things to both sides, right? We do one thing to both sides, really, but two things. We're doing two things, one on each side. So one thing to both sides of the equation. So that's the order. And what we do is we figure out, well, can I add or subtract something first? Adding and subtracting are two sides of the same coin, if you will. Dividing and multiplying, same thing. Exponents, and then parentheses. Okay, exponents and parentheses don't really go together. But divide and multiply and add and subtract do. So, for number one, here's what I want to do. 8 plus v is what's happening. Anytime you want to get rid of a number that's next to a variable, and that's how you solve, right? When you solve an equation, it's the variable equals something. That's how you know it's done, because you just have the variable equals. None of these are already like that, which is why it's called one-step equations. We have one step to get to the answer. So if it's 8 plus v, what's the opposite of 8? Well, negative 8, right? So if I want to get rid of 8, I have to do the opposite of 8, which is negative 8, or to subtract 8. But if I subtract something on the right side of the equation, I have to also subtract it on the left side. 8 minus 8 is 0 plus v, right? 0 plus v is just v. 26 minus 8 is 18. So v equals 18. All right, so that was pretty slow, but as I go, I'm going to start to pick up the pace a little bit. So if you need me to go slow, stick with me for these couple. If you need me to go a little faster, then you can either hit double time, double speed, or whatever, or you can just skip forward a little bit as I start to go faster with the later problems. Okay? So number 2, 3 plus p. Okay, so what's the opposite of 3? The opposite of 3 is negative 3. And also, I know I'm going to be subtracting 3 because I'm adding or subtracting to p. 3, it could be plus or minus, actually. 3 plus or minus p. That means that I'm going to be adding or subtracting. Then I do the opposite of the number. So I identify the operation, plus, and the 3 is positive. So then I do the opposite of positive 3, which is minus 3 or negative 3. 3 minus 3 is 0. I'm just going to write p this time. 0 plus p is p. 8 minus 3 is 5. And there we go. All right, so I'm going to change colors. Change colors every 2 problems here. And here we go. So same thing, 15 plus b. So I'm adding again. Number 1 and number 2 I was adding, so I'm adding again, so I know I'm going to be subtracting. Okay. This time I'm not going to put the little divider. If you have trouble keeping what's on the left and what's on the right, do what I did in number 1 and number 2. But you don't need to as long as you don't have an issue with it. Okay, it's not like necessary. So this is b equals 23 minus 15 is going to be 8. You can use a calculator for these if you want, but not if the teacher doesn't want you to and won't let you use a calculator on the test. So be careful with that. Don't practice with a calculator if you can't use one on the test. I know it's not fair, but you gotta practice for the assessment, because usually the assessment is worth a lot of points. This time I have negative 15 plus n. So I wasn't really explaining it as I was going. I was kind of talking about something else, but negative 15 plus n, you would think the opposite of plus is minus, and it is, but negative 15 plus n just means that I'm going to have to either add or subtract the 15 on both sides. Identify the operation, negative 15 plus n. I'm adding, in this case. It could have also been subtracting, adding or subtracting. So I know I'm going to have to add or subtract to get rid of the 15. Then I look at the sign of the number that I want to get rid of and do the opposite of that. So first, I had to figure out how the number was interacting with the letter. All right, so I had to figure out how is the number interacting with the letter. So that's what I did first. Then I find out what's the opposite. Then I find the opposite operation. Opposite. Ended up spelling that weird. Find the opposite operation. Opposite operation. So that's what you have to do. It's a little tricky sometimes because you don't just do the opposite of the sign in the middle. Because in this case, that wouldn't work because the opposite of negative 15 is positive 15. That's the number that's going to get rid of the 15. Not the opposite of the sign in between them necessarily. Could be, but not in this case. So instead, think of it like two-step problem. Number 1, what's the number interacting with the letter? How is the number interacting with the letter? Okay, is it adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing? And then you find the opposite operation. They're two separate things. Okay, so then that cancels, and n is going to be equal to negative 9 plus 15 is actually the same thing as 15 minus 9, which is 6. Okay, all I did was flip the numbers with the signs attached to them. 15 is positive, 9 is negative, so negative 9 plus 15 is the same thing as 15 minus 9. You can flip the numbers around as long as you're careful to keep the sign attached to the number it belongs to. The negative sign belongs to the number that is immediately to its right, not its left. So as long as you remember that, you can switch the numbers around so that it makes more sense in your head to do. Totally fine. Just got to remember to keep that negative attached to the right place. Okay, next one. And as I promised, I'm going to start going a little bit faster here. This is plus. Opposite of plus is minus. That goes like that. These both are negative. So if you remember when I was talking about integers, and if you don't, if this is the first video you've seen in this series, I was talking about integers, there's a worksheet I did on integers. By the way, this worksheet is part of a whole series of Kuta Algebra 1 worksheets, the most popular worksheets that your teacher usually assigns for practice, either for homework or practice in class or whatever, maybe both. Maybe you have to finish whatever you don't finish in class for homework. But anyways, that's what this series is on, and I did a couple videos on worksheets that had to do with putting together integers. So go check that out. I'm not going to explain it in depth, but basically there's a negative 12 minus 4. So if I just focus on what numbers have negative signs, they both do. Since they both have a negative, if the signs are the same, you add the numbers. So I'm going to add 12 and 4. 12 and 4 makes 16, but since I'm adding two negative numbers, it becomes negative 16. I'm adding two negatives to get a bigger negative. Like when you owe somebody money and you borrow more money, right? Okay. Number 6 is going to be pretty straightforward. No crazy integer stuff. The opposite of, and here's the two-step process, right? So how is the number interacting with the letter? X minus 7, so I'm going to be adding or subtracting. What's the opposite operation? Well, the opposite of minus 7 is plus 7. Plus 7 plus 7. Right, so x equals 20. Right, so that was a little bit quick, but that one was a little bit not as, that one was pretty straightforward, I think. Okay. On to the next set here. I'm going to add 9. Okay. M minus 9, the opposite of minus 9 is plus 9. So that cancels. M equals, and I'm going to be subtracting because the signs are different. Even though it's negative 13 plus 9, the signs are different, so I subtract. Okay. Now, it could help to do this. If it doesn't, then don't worry about doing it this way. But what I like to do that might be helpful, you can give it a try if you haven't already, is just subtract the numbers as if it's the big number minus the little number. That's what you first learned when you learned subtraction way back when, was big number minus little number, and that way you get a positive answer. So just do it that way. Makes more sense, right? Wouldn't this just be 4? It's not bad, right? Now, it is not going to be 4, but it is going to be close to 4. It's going to be negative 4. All you have to do is add a negative sign to it. And I knew to add a negative sign to it because when I changed this problem to a problem that made more sense, 13 minus 9, from negative 13 plus 9, then I had to flip the signs of both numbers, which means I need to flip the sign of my answer. Okay? So it's okay to just subtract how it makes the most sense to you. Just make sure, once you get the answer, you check to make sure if it should be positive or if it should change to a negative. So that's what's really tricky about integers. You got to really watch out for that. Plus 6, plus 6. Forgot to box my answer here. Okay. Negative 5 plus 6 is 1 because it's the same thing as, it is the same thing as 6 minus 5. I was talking a little fast there for a second. And on to the next one. Okay, the opposite of minus 15 is plus 15. V equals, I'm going to be subtracting again, so I'm going to get negative 12. And next, minus 16. N is going to be equal to 9 minus 16. Thought I heard my phone vibrate. Nope. So 9 minus 16 is going to be the opposite of 16 minus 9, which is 7. So this is going to be negative 7. Get distracted really easily. I'm just going to put my phone off to the side so it doesn't distract me. Ooh, okay. Hold on. This is a whole different thing here. We got to 10, and now we're on 11. Getting to the end of the first page here, this is a little different, but it's still SADMAP. This whole time, we've been doing only subtraction and addition. This whole time, up until now, the first 10 problems, we've only been adding or subtracting a number on both sides. But remember the two steps. The two steps were, one, figure out how the number is interacting with the letter. This time it's 8 times x. So then you find the opposite operation. What's the opposite of multiplying by positive 8? Dividing by positive 8. Right? You only divide by a negative if the number is already negative. Okay, so with adding and subtracting, you want the opposite sign, so it cancels. With multiplying and dividing, you want the same sign, so it cancels. Right? A little bit confusing on the surface, but once you get the hang of it, it's not so bad. Practice makes perfect. I want to divide by a positive 8. Because here, when it cancels, it's not turning into 0, it's turning into 1. 8 divided by 8 is 1. 1 times x is x. So we want it to cancel by dividing it by exactly the same thing as itself. It's still the opposite operation, but the sign of the number doesn't change compared to the sign that we're trying to get rid of. Okay. So then we divide that, and I don't know what that is off the top of my head, actually. 8, 10, 1, 2, 4, 3, 13. Should be negative 13. Okay, and I know the answer is negative because I'm dividing a negative by a positive. So if you have trouble with integers on multiplying and dividing, then think about it this way. If I have a plus times a plus, makes a plus. Plus times a minus makes a minus. Minus times a plus makes a minus. And a minus times a minus makes a plus. Okay, and this also works for division, because multiplying and dividing are two sides of the same coin, like I mentioned earlier. Okay, so hopefully that little smiley face diagram helps out. I'm going to divide by 14. And I have a feeling that's going to go in evenly as well. Is this going to be negative or positive? Yeah, it's going to be negative, right? Negative divided by a positive is a, oh, I just said negative and then I wrote positive, sorry. There we go, negative sign. And then 56 and 14, 2, 3, 4, 4? Yeah, 4 works. B is negative 4. Oh, forgot to box my answers again. There we go. All right, next color. And we're on the last 2 of the first page here. So we had to divide for 11 and 12. Now it looks like we're having to multiply, at least for 13 here, because this is b divided by 18. b over 18 is another way to say it. Or b 18ths. That's another way to say it. But it's division. A fraction is division. Fractions equal division. Right? So fractions equal division. All right. So with that in mind, if we're going to do the opposite of division, we do multiplication, right? So we multiply both sides by positive 18. Because it's positive 18 here, it's b over 18, so we multiply both sides by positive 18. And then 18 times 6. Let's see, 6 times 8, that's 48. 410. And it's negative, because a positive times a negative is a negative. And there we go. All right, this one's going to be really straightforward. We just divide by 10. Since it's 10n means 10 times n, so the opposite of times is divide. Divide by 10, n equals 4. Okay, next, change color. So here, it's v divided by 8. The opposite of dividing is multiplying. So I'm going to multiply by 8. Remember, positive 8. And v is equal to 16. Okay. So same thing here. And I don't know what that is. It would be 16, 16, but 16 would be 1 and then 6, so 176. Okay, you can check my math on that if you want, because the answers are below on this worksheet. You can also just Google the title of this worksheet. So let me go to the top real quick and show you what I mean. If you just Google one-step equations, and then maybe the word Kuta, Kuta, Kilo, Umbrella, Tango, Alpha, then this will pop up. And it has the answers down below, by the way. So the answers are down below. If you ever need the answers, you can just Google it and get the answers that way. But it's always good to know how it works, because just having the answers is usually not good enough for the test. So it's always good to know how this stuff works. Now, this one's a little bit different. I'm going to be dividing by negative 15, because the opposite of multiply is divide. I'm not trying to add or subtract to x. It's negative 15x, which means negative 15 times x. The opposite of times is divide, and I divide by the exact same number. When you divide or multiply, you divide by that exact number, including the sign. You don't do the opposite sign. That's only for adding and subtracting. Here we do the same sign. Otherwise, it wouldn't cancel, because negative 15 divided by negative 15 is positive 1, so it cancels. And I get x. 0 divided by any number, whether it's positive or negative, is 0. So x is 0. Okay. Then we do the same thing here. Divide by negative 17. And this is a negative divided by a negative, so it's going to be a positive. And then I don't know how many times that goes in. Let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8? No, 9, 10, 11. It'd be more than, yeah, it'd be more than 10, because it's more than that. 12? 12 maybe. I'm thinking 12. Let's try it out. 7 times 2 is 14. 2 times 1 is 2 plus 1 is 3. 7, and then that went away. 1, 4, 0, 2. Yeah, 204. Okay. So it was 12. Wow, that was a tricky one. Now, of course, if you can use a calculator on this, it's not so tricky, right? But if you have to do it by hand, then you're kind of just guessing. Or you could have divided it. That actually might have been easier than what I did, actually. Let me leave this here. Let me show you what I mean. 204. 17. Goes in once. 1 times 17 is 17. Get 3, 34, and then that would go in twice. Yeah, that was way easier than trying to guess what it multiplies by. So either way works. And then, of course, if you can use a calculator, just use a calculator and just ignore everything I just said. On to the next one. We have 21 equals negative 7, and the opposite of multiply is divide. Remember, it's not the sign that tells you whether you're adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing. We're multiplying, so we divide to get rid of the number. Positive divided by a negative is a negative. 21 divided by 7 is 3. So the answer is negative 3. Multiply by 4. M equals negative 52. Okay. Next color. And we're almost done, actually. We're getting into harder problems, but really they're just harder because they have bigger numbers. They're still one-step equations. So I'm going to go a little bit faster, as long as I can do the mental math here. That's going to be like 9. Yeah, I want to say like 9. 36, 9, 3, yeah. Yeah, so that's 9. So negative 9. Over here, divide by negative 11. And that's going to be what? 30, no, 3, 13, 13. Positive 13. Yeah, because 13, 13, 1, 3, 4, yeah. And then it's a negative times, or divided by a negative, which makes a positive. All right, on to the next color. Let's start with the blue right after the one I started with, and then kind of go in the opposite direction here. So again, be really careful with these. This is similar to one of the first ones we did, but these are really tricky because you're tempted to do minus thinking it's the sign in between, but it's not the sign in between. The sign in between just tells you whether you might be adding or subtracting. So we know because of this that we're either going to be adding or subtracting. Then the sign of the number, the opposite of that, the opposite of the sign of the number you're trying to get rid of, tells you whether you're adding or subtracting. So I would add 16. Okay, so be really careful with that. It's kind of tricky. X equals 1. Multiply by 18. It's a really cool trick to multiplying by 18s in your head, by the way. What you do is you take half the number and then you add a 0. So this is 90. Negative, because positive times a negative is a negative. But yeah, and if you want to multiply any number by 5, you just take half of the number and then add a 0. Pretty cool. Add 15. So I get negative 2. Oh, I think I forgot to switch colors. Oh well, I'll switch colors on the next set of 4, and then we'll just do it that way. Plus 8 plus 8, and equals negative 2. And last color here. Multiply by 7. 7 times 8 is 56. And then we're done. A equals 9. And yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and switch. Why not? Plus 7. M equals 15. And we want to subtract 18. All right, this is one of those tricky ones. The sign in between does not necessarily tell you whether you're going to be adding or subtracting. Just that you are going to be either adding or subtracting, not which kind. Be really careful. And that's the final answer. So those are all of the problems, all worked out for you. This is part of a series on every worksheet that is out there for Algebra 1, not in a super strict order, so just search around on the playlist if you're looking for a specific algebra topic. But here are all the answers. Let me know if I missed one. It's possible. I'm only human, so I make mistakes sometimes. So let me know if I made a mistake somewhere in the comments, or let me know if there was a specific thing that I missed, or let me know if there's a specific topic that you want me to cover next. Again, I'm not going in any particular order. I'm sort of going in order. But if you're looking for a specific algebra worksheet to be solved, just let me know in the comments, and I will make that my next priority when I do another one of these videos. All right? And these videos come out every Tuesday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you can look forward to a video like this every week on Tuesday. And if you haven't gotten my awesome free guide called The 5 Math Mistakes Everyone Makes and How to Avoid Them, it's just a little PDF thing that I put together for you to help you to, well, not miss math mistakes. So if you'd like to not make any more math mistakes by figuring out what you're doing wrong and how to, stop doing that and start doing the right things to get the math problems right, go check that out. It's on my website, myersmathematics.com, and I'll see you in another episode real soon.